Okay, so if you haven't watched the video about limiting reactant, go watch that first because you're going to get confused. Um, but the other thing that they might ask you about a limiting reactant is how much of something is left over. And so when we did the limiting reactant problem here, we figured out that the carbon monoxide was the limiting reactant, which makes the iodine 5 oxide the excess reactant. So since this is the excess reactant, we're not going to use all of it up, okay? And so a lot of times what they ask you on the problem is what is the limiting reactant and how much of the excess reactant is left over. And people have trouble with this, but it's not that bad. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that right here. And I'm going to use the back of this sheet. So if I keep flipping and flopping, that's why I'm doing that. Okay, so right now the question we're going to ask is how much of the iodine 5 oxide is left over, and we're going to see how to do that. So what I do is I start out again with my 28 grams of carbon monoxide because that's the limiting reactant, okay? And then I switch it to moles, and so 1 mole CO is 28 grams, which was really easy last time because that just cancels it right on out there. And then I look here. I'm not trying to make either of the products. If I want to do the excess reactant calculation, I'm looking right here. And for every 1 mole of the iodine 5 oxide I use, I need 5 moles of carbon monoxide. So I'm going to set up that ratio. 1 mole of 205 to 5 moles of CO. It's a gas, and that's a gas. And so you see what we're building here. All we're doing is the same thing we did, turn it into the product, but we're turning it into the other reactant, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and switch that into grams. And so if I looked here, it was 333.81 grams I2O5 over 1 mole I2O5. Okay, so I'll show you that. So this will get us how many grams of I2O5 that are used up in the reaction with the 28 grams. Now, hopefully, if I've done this right, it's going to be less than 80, okay? So 28 divided by 28 is 1. Okay, so 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. And so all I'm right here. 28 divided by 28 is 1. Times 1 is 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. And then times 333.81. Cool. So I got 66.76 grams of I2O5 that I've used up. Okay, so that's good because if I started out with 80 grams, and I'll get my dog here in a minute, don't worry about all that. 80 grams, 66.76 grams. So 80 minus answer, boom. 13.238 grams. Let's just say since we started out with only 2 sig figs, and this really isn't a sig fig problem, let's just call it 13 grams. So I use up essentially 67 grams, and I have 13 left over. Okay, so I started with 80. I used this much, which we found here, and I had 13 left over. Now I'm going to go attend to my dog. Excuse me for having him impede on our conversation.